My name is Sarah Calloway. I am 37. I verify structural integrity for a living. I walk into buildings that other people have already signed off on and I find what they missed. The crack behind the drywall. The bolt that was never tightened. The load-bearing wall someone decided wasn't important enough to mark on the plans. I have been doing this for 13 years and the one thing this job has burned into me permanently is that the most dangerous failures are never the obvious ones. They are the ones that look fine on the surface until the day they aren't. I applied that lesson to buildings for 13 years before I applied it to my own family. That is the part one will carry longest. My sister Grace is 4 years younger than me. She restores old furniture. She finds pieces that other people have thrown away, scratched, broken, written off, and she brings them back. She works slowly and carefully and when she is finished you cannot tell where the damage was. People drive hours to buy from her. She has a waiting list 6 months long. She is one of those rare people who found the thing she was made to do and simply did it, without noise, without asking anyone's permission. Grace is also the kind of woman who sees the good in people before she sees anything else. Warm in a way that is completely unguarded. Open in a way that I have always admired and quietly worried about at the same time. Because the people who see good in everyone first are also the people who don't see the wrong kind of person coming until it is already too late. The first time she called me about Richard Holt, her voice had something in it I couldn't quite name. Brightness, yes. But underneath it something careful. Like a person walking across a floor they aren't entirely sure will hold them. I told myself I was reading too much into a phone call. I do that. Occupational habit. I look for what's wrong in everything. The Holts were old money in a city that had learned to treat old money like a religion. 3 generations. A foundation with their name engraved above the entrance. A law firm that had carried the family name for 40 years. A house with iron gates and a fountain in the driveway that ran through winter because stopping it would have meant admitting that something had changed. Richard was the younger son. Handsome in the way that good tailoring and perfect teeth produce. Polished in the way that takes years of careful maintenance. He pulled out chairs. He remembered names. He asked questions about other people and actually seemed to listen to the answers. Perfect. Deliberate. The kind of man who has practiced being liked for so long it no longer requires any effort at all. And perfect always makes me reach for my inspection notes. His mother, Catherine Holt, was 61 and ran the family the way I run a difficult job site. Nothing moved without her knowing. Nothing was decided without her approving it first. She was elegant in a way that had clearly taken decades to construct and fluent in the particular kind of cruelty that arrives dressed as a compliment so that the person receiving it isn't entirely sure what just happened until hours later. At the engagement dinner she placed me beside her, which I understood immediately was a test and not a kindness. She asked what I did. I told her. She smiled and said how interesting, that it must feel so satisfying to work with your hands, the way you would say it to someone who lays tile for a living. Then she turned to Grace. And you restore old furniture, she said. How sweet. People do love giving broken things a second chance. She let the word broken sit in the middle of the table until it curdled into something else entirely. I watched my sister's posture drop half an inch. I watched my parents laugh along with whatever Catherine said next, leaning toward her warmth the way cold people lean toward any available heat. I kept my voice level and asked Catherine one question. I asked how Richard and Grace had first met. Her smile didn't move. But something behind it shifted. A small quiet recalculation. The look of a person remembering there are things they would prefer not to have asked about in front of witnesses. At a charity event, she said. He has always been so generous with his time. I noted that answer the way I note a hairline crack that is nothing today and structural by spring. Generous with his time. I would come back to that line. It would come back to me too. Before I go any further, if you are new here, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Revenge Stories. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. Now back to the story. The red flags did not arrive as red flags. They arrived as small things. The kind of things that each mean nothing on their own and only form a pattern when you step back far enough to see the whole picture. Grace's best friend from university called me on a Tuesday evening and started a sentence 4 times before she got to the end of it. "I just want Grace to be safe," she said finally. There were things about Richard before. Things that people who knew him talked about. I asked what things. She went quiet. "I probably shouldn't have called," she said. And then her number went dark when I tried it back 2 days later. People don't go silent like that over gossip. They go silent when staying silent has already cost them something and they aren't willing to pay again. So I did what I do. I looked. I searched Richard Holt through every public record I had access to and a few I had to work to reach. Permit databases. Civil court indexes. County filings going back 10 years. And the thing I found was the thing that should have reassured me but didn't. Nothing. Not a rough edge anywhere. A man that polished isn't fortunate. He is maintained. Someone had paid to keep every surface clean. And you do not spend money hiding a record that was already clean. 3 weeks before the wedding, the prenuptial agreement arrived by courier. A lawyer named Graves, who had worked for the Holt family long enough to have a dedicated parking space at their estate, called it a formality. He used that word 6 times in one phone call. The way people use a word when they need it to carry more weight than it actually can. Grace was told to sign it and not concern herself with the details. No lawyer of her own. No accounting of what Richard actually owned. No time to think. Just a deadline shaped like a wedding date and a stack of pages she was expected to initial without reading. I sat at my kitchen table that night with the document under my inspection light and I felt my whole spine straighten because this I knew exactly how to read. A contract is just a structure made of language. You can see precisely where it is designed to fail and who it is designed to fail on. The terms were severe. In the event of divorce, Grace walked away with nothing. Waived all support. Signed a confidentiality clause so broad it would have covered anything she had ever witnessed, heard, or experienced inside that marriage from the first day to the last. But it was one line inside the recital section that stopped my pen completely. The recital. That dry opening block of whereas clauses that no one reads because lawyers write it like background noise. I read it. I always read everything. And buried in the middle of it was a reference to a prior confidential settlement, identified by case number, described only as a matter previously resolved by the Holt family. A settlement reference inside a prenuptial agreement is like a patch bolted over a crack in a load-bearing wall. It doesn't fix the problem. It just tells you exactly where the problem is. I went back through the entire document slowly. Red pen under every clause until the margins were completely marked. The confidentiality language was not standard. It was specific. It reached backward as well as forward, binding Grace to silence about matters the Holt family had already resolved before she had ever set foot inside that house. You do not write language like that for a marriage. You write it for a cover-up that needs a new room to hide in. I drove to Grace's apartment the next morning and asked her gently whether she understood what the settlement clause referred to. She went still in the particular way people go still when they have been hoping a question would never be asked. She said Richard had explained it once. That someone had caused trouble years ago and his family had taken care of it. Taken care of it? I asked who the person was. Grace's eyes moved to the hallway before she answered. She said she didn't want to talk about it inside the apartment. I didn't push. I had learned that pushing Grace toward a wall only made her press harder against it. But I drove home with a case number circled in red ink and a name written in the back of my work notebook where I keep the things that matter. I want to pause here and ask you something. If you found what I found buried inside a contract your sister was about to sign, what would you have done? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story is landing close to something real, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Now back to the story. I had 11 days before the wedding. I had a case number, a name, and a sealed file that I could not open. What I could find was the spine of it. The public bones. The part that money can quiet but cannot erase. I went to work. The wedding was at the Holt estate on a Saturday afternoon in late September. White tent on a lawn that had been cut to a precise uniform height. 150 guests in carefully chosen clothes. A floral arch at the altar that must have cost more than Grace made in 3 months of restoration work. Everything correct. Everything curated. Everything designed to announce that this family knew exactly how things should be done. Grace looked beautiful. The kind of beautiful that is also fragile, like something that has been repaired so many times it holds together through habit more than strength. That brightness I had first heard on the phone 18 months ago was still present but thinner now. Closer to the surface. The way a finish looks when the wood underneath is starting to move. I sat in the third row beside my parents. Mom in her good dress. Dad in the jacket he saves for occasions that require him to look like he belongs somewhere he isn't sure he does. Both of them with their careful faces on. The ceremony began. Then, at the moment right before the vows, Catherine Holt rose from the front row. She rose slowly. The way a person rises when they have decided in advance that this is going to be a moment and they want everyone in the room to feel it happen. She had papers in her hand. She walked into the center of the aisle, turned to face the guests, and in a voice pitched to carry to every corner of that tent she said she had something to say on behalf of her family. Then she looked at my sister. And she said it. Trash. She used that word. Standing at the altar of her own son's wedding in front of 150 witnesses, she looked at my sister Grace and she said that word out loud like it was a verdict she had been waiting to deliver for a long time. Then she threw the prenuptial agreement. The pages hit Grace in the chest and fell across the grass at her feet. The tent went completely silent. I looked at my father. He was looking at the ground. I looked at my mother. Her lips were pressed together and her hands were flat on her thighs, and she was doing the thing she does when she has decided that whatever is happening in front of her is not something she is going to involve herself in. Something in me went very quiet and very certain. I stood up. I walked up that aisle past the flowers and the frozen guests, and I bent down and gathered every page off the grass. I straightened them. I held them the way you hold something you are about to read carefully. Then I tore them in half. The sound of it went through that tent like something breaking that had needed to break for a long time. I took my sister's hand. Come on, I said. We're leaving. We walked out together. Across the cold marble entryway and into the September sun. Behind us the whole beautiful constructed machine sat completely still. 3 weeks later I drove to the Holt estate alone. I had a folder under my arm. Inside it was a public court docket. A case number that matched the settlement reference in the prenup. A protective order that a judge had signed, which judges do not sign without cause. And a letter from a paralegal confirming that every document I held was a matter of public record that no amount of money could reach back and seal. I set the folder on the cold marble table in Catherine Holt's sitting room and I sat down across from her and I waited while she opened it. The color left her face the way water leaves when a drain is opened. All at once and from somewhere underneath. She looked up at me. I kept my voice exactly as level as a poured floor. I said, "You called my sister trash in front of 150 people. You threw a contract at her chest at her own wedding. And you built everything on the certainty that nobody would ever read the whole thing." I read the whole thing. I always read the whole thing. That is my job. She started to speak. I closed the folder. I didn't need her to say anything. The documents had already said everything that needed saying, and they had said it in the kind of language that doesn't require a response. I stood up, picked up my folder, and walked back out across that cold marble floor and into the daylight where the truth was already waiting and had been waiting for a long time. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this one. If this story reminded you that the truth does not need volume, it just needs to be said out loud where the people who buried it have to hear it, share it with someone who needs that reminder today. Subscribe to Calm Revenge Stories if you have not already, and I will see you in the next one.